With me, I have Tiffany Roberts to discuss our concerns with the cap-and-trade funding.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Tiffany Roberts from the Legislative Analyst Office. And as you've been talking about today, there are some legal constraints associated with the cap-and-trade revenues. When we analyzed this particular question, we had two legal concerns that we raised in our analysis, and then we also raised a policy consideration that we think is important for the legislature to consider. So in terms of the legal constraints, as you've heard, cap-and-trade is basically considered to be a fee-based regulation. Therefore, based on an opinion that we received from Ledge Counsel, they've advised us that the cap-and-trade revenues are indeed a mitigation fee. So as such, it's subject to the Sinclair Nexus test. And what that essentially means is that any project or program that you fund with those revenues will need to pass what's referred to as the Nexus test. In other words, it needs to be able to show that you're mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. Now, obviously, there are a number of opinions from a legal standpoint. And I think one of the main issues here is that we're talking about a very new program. And because it's very new, there's no case law on it. So there's no fundamental law that we can review to say definitively if this is for certain legally risky or not legally risky. But it is our job to at least tell the legislature that there is some legal risk associated with this. One of the primary reasons that you've got the legal risk is because of the timing of the project. So as you know, AB 32 basically states that the state of California needs to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. So what could be problematic here is that the high-speed rail project won't even be online until after 2020. So there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of timing. Let me move on to the policy consideration. So I believe a couple of members have talked about AB 32 and the intent of AB 32. And so from a greenhouse gas emission perspective, it's going to be important that you consider the return on investment that you get from any use of revenues. And so the High-Speed Rail Authority referred to the scoping plan. And in the scoping plan, it basically states that the project has the potential to reduce emissions by 2030 by 1 million metric tons of CO2e a year. Now, I'd ask you to compare that to other types of programs such as green building codes and energy efficiency standards. To give you some comparison in terms of numbers, the green building code would be expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 26 million metric tons of CO2e. Energy efficiency standards would be expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 21 million metric tons of CO2e. So when comparing those types of programs to 1 million metric tons of CO2e, it's important to at least think about what your return on investment would be per dollar invested and comparing that to the greenhouse gas emission reductions that you could achieve from a program. Thank you.
Yes, please continue.
If there are no further questions on the cap-and-trade